Hello and welcome back. In the last lecture, we talked about the 4 stages of risk management, and in this video, we'll discuss risk analysis process in more detail. So you might be wondering, what is risk analysis, right? Basically, the definition is in the words analyzing the risk that is present in your devices, but to be formal, risk analysis is the foundation of the risk management process, and it involves gathering the information and identify all the hazards that are present in your devices and estimate the risk that they pose, right? Whether it be a small hazard or is it the hazard that can lead to a death of the person. So you need to analyze those. And even in risk analysis, you have 4 steps that you can go by. Usually a lot of people don't talk about this, but since I have a lot of experience in this field, this is how you kind of find the risk analysis, right? The first step is determine the intended use and reasonably foreseeable misuse, right? This involves clearly defining how the medical device is intended to be used, and as well as potential misuse that can happen. This is important because it helps identify the hazard and hazardous situations that needs to be considered. Because if a person is using the device as it's not supposed to be used, then that can have a hazard, right? Let's look at an example. A manufacturer of the blood glucose level would need to consider its intended use for the patient to monitor their blood sugar levels, but possibly being used by healthcare professionals in a clinical setting. To diagnose the diabetes, right? So you can't only think about the patient will be using it, they have to think the hospitals also need to use it. And the second one is identifying characteristics related to safety. So this involves identifying all the characteristics of the medical device that could affect its safety, such as design, material, and operating principles. This is important because it helps to identify the potential hazards that can cause the harm, right? So in this one, you can get information from your clinical trials and clinical effect analysis documents and so on. So let's look at an example. A manufacturer of the surgical robot would need to consider the risk associated with its sharp edges, moving parts, and its electrical components, right? Each of these characteristics could potentially cause harm to the patient and the surgical team if not properly controlled. Because surgical equipment is supposed to move, so they really have to think about what if it moves in unintended directions. And the third one will be identifying hazard and hazardous situation. So here we come to the nitty-gritty, right? So here we find out all the hazards and hazardous situation associated with a medical device and specific situation in which those hazards can cause harm, right? And hazard is anything that could potentially cause harm, while hazardous situation is specific circumstance where the harm could occur, right? So this is the step where people mostly use PFMEA and DFMEA. And to look at this example of an insulin pump, they need to consider the electrical malfunction of the hazardous situation of delivering an incorrect dose to the patient. This could happen if the pump malfunctions and deliver too much or too little of the insulin, right? So they need to think about all these kind of scenarios in the hazard and hazardous situations. And the fourth one in our list is estimating risk. So here, this involves estimating the likelihood and severity of the harm for each hazardous situation. This is done using a variety of methods, such as one that is very popular called risk metrics. So here you already have a risk, now you have to basically categorize them. And risk metrics is very handy. I have a separate video on this, you guys are free to watch. I'll link in the bottom of our module. But risk metrics is basically a table that plots the likelihood of occurrence of the harm against the severity of the harm, right? And basically likelihood of occurrence would be 4 category: remote likelihood, low, medium, high and certain, like how many times it can occur. Is it very less or is it always going to occur, right? Severity, on the other hand, also has four. It is negligible, minor, significant, or catastrophic. So when you match those together, if it's very less likely to happen, and if it's not that much severe, then it's a low risk, right? So by assigning a score to each category, the risk matrix can be used to calculate overall risk score for each hazardous situation. This score can then be used to determine whether the risk is acceptable or does it require a risk control. Like, do you need to lower the risk further by by using more redundant circuits, or by using more quality control on your process and things of that sort. And now let's see, why do you need risk controls? For example, if there is a risk on your devices, like if you have a heart monitor, sometimes it gives such a strong shock that people can die from it. You definitely need to control that, because the severity is very high, and if it happens a lot, then that's a high risk situation. So in this kind of things, you have to control your risk, right? So to summarize, risk analysis is a critical stage for the risk management process. By carefully considering the intended use, characteristics, hazard, and hazardous situation associated with a medical device, companies or you guys can estimate the risk and determine which ones need to be addressed, which risk need to be addressed, right? So that was all about risk analysis. I hope this was very informative. In the next video, we'll discuss about the risk evaluation and control in more detail. So to basically summarize our risk analysis, we're analyzing all the risk that is associated with a medical device in all the life cycle, right? We talked about life cycle, whether that would be during the design development, production, logistic, distribution, and decommissioning, or installation, or during the use. So you basically find all the risk that can happen to the patient or to the people that are administering a device, and write it down. Okay, in this process, maybe this can happen, right? And what is the hazardous situation regarding it? And for example, if your device can cause infection, for example, if it touches a person's body, right? How severe is that infection? Is it fatal? If it's fatal, then you need to make sure that the sharp edges and things in your devices is really minimal. Or maybe you need to sterilize your medical device so that it does not cause infection to people. So that's what we're talking about, risk analysis, and then looking at the risk severity, right? And if it causes a great harm to your patient, then you need to control the risk. And that's basically what risk management process is. So I hope this video was informative. I will see you guys on the next lecture where we'll talk about risk evaluation. Thank you.